Case 1. Captain Daniel Dusek once held one of the most trusted positions in the U.S. Navy. As Deputy Director of Operations for the U.S. 7th Fleet and later as commander of ships like the USS Bonhomme Richard and USS Essex, he had access to sensitive military information across the Pacific. But by 2016, Dusek's career collapsed under the weight of corruption. He became the highest-ranking Navy officer convicted in the Fat Leonard bribery scandal, a scheme that exposed how greed compromised U.S. naval operations for years. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Dusek began accepting bribes around 2010 from Leonard Glenn Francis, the Malaysian defense contractor who ran Glenn Defense Marine Asia (GDMA). In exchange for luxury hotel stays, extravagant meals, and the company of prostitutes, Dusek used his position to steer Navy ships to ports controlled by GDMA, allowing the contractor to overcharge the U.S. military for fuel, supplies, and services. Federal investigators said Dusek not only violated Navy ethics, but also actively leaked ship schedules and operational details that put U.S. security at risk. In January 2015, Dusek pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit bribery. On March 25, 2016, a federal judge sentenced him to 46 months in prison, ordered him to pay a $70,000 fine and $30,000 restitution to the Navy. Case 2. Christian Marc Saucier was a machinist's mate aboard the USS Alexandria, a U.S. Navy nuclear-powered attack submarine. In 2009, while serving on board, he used his personal cell phone to take 6 classified photographs of restricted areas, including the reactor compartment and control panels. Those images, taken on January 19, March 22, and July 15, 2009, showed parts of the submarine's propulsion system, which were never meant to be seen outside the military. Saucier later said he took them as keepsakes, but the law viewed them differently. The photos contained national defense information. When investigators discovered one of his old phones in 2012, the case reignited. The FBI and NCIS questioned Saucier, but during the probe, he destroyed a laptop, camera, and memory card, actions prosecutors argued showed intent to obstruct justice. On May 27, 2016, Saucier pleaded guilty to 1 count of unauthorized retention of national defense information. In August 2016, a federal judge in Connecticut sentenced him to 12 months in prison, 6 months of home confinement, and supervised release. The court emphasized that even without sharing the images, merely keeping them violated national security protocol. The case drew national attention and sparked political comparisons to other classified information controversies. After completing his sentence, Saucier publicly stated that his mistake cost him his Navy career, pension, and reputation. 2 years later, on March 9, 2018, President Donald Trump issued a full pardon, citing the sailor's honorable prior service. Case 3. Admiral Robert P. Burke spent decades rising through the ranks of the U.S. Navy. By 2019, he had reached one of the highest positions possible, Vice Chief of Naval Operations, the second in command of the entire Navy. He later commanded U.S. naval forces in Europe and Africa. But in 2025, the career of this 4-star admiral collapsed when federal prosecutors revealed a bribery scheme that shocked the military world. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Burke used his position and influence to steer a Navy contract worth $355,000 to a private technology company called Next Jump. In return, the company secretly promised him a post-retirement job valued at roughly $500,000 per year with additional stock options. The deal took shape in 2021, after the Navy had already ended a previous program with the same company for poor performance. Federal investigators said Burke's actions clearly violated ethics laws that forbid officials from seeking personal benefit while still in service. On May 19, 2025, a jury in Washington, D.C. found Burke guilty of 4 criminal counts: conspiracy to commit bribery, performing acts affecting a personal financial interest, and concealing material facts. During the trial, prosecutors described his conduct as a clear betrayal of public trust. His lawyers argued it was a misunderstanding of post-retirement employment discussions, but the evidence told a different story. On September 16, 2025, Burke stood before a federal judge to hear his sentence: 6 years in federal prison. Case 4. Dwanya Hickerson was a U.S. Navy sailor stationed at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. In July 2016, he met Dee Wiggum, a 25-year-old licensed nurse from Shibuya, Mississippi. The two had talked online before agreeing to meet in person at a hotel in St. Martin, Mississippi. What began as a simple meeting ended in one of the state's most disturbing murder cases involving a member of the Navy. According to court records and police reports, Hickerson attacked Wiggum inside the hotel room on July 23, 2016, stabbing her 119 times and slashing her throat several times. Surveillance footage showed Hickerson leaving the hotel alone, wearing his shirt around his neck moments after the attack. 2 days later, on July 25th, he was arrested while returning to base. Investigators said he later admitted to the killing, claiming he lost control after Wiggum revealed she was transgender. The case drew national attention, highlighting the dangers faced by transgender people in the United States. In July 2017, Hickerson pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and robbery in a Mississippi courtroom. The judge sentenced him to 40 years in prison, ordering that he serve the full term without early release. Prosecutors said he also took Wiggum's phone and wallet after the murder. The Navy confirmed that Hickerson was dishonorably discharged, ending his military career in disgrace. Before we get to the next Navy officer, if you have found these stories interesting so far, please support my channel by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Case 5. Captain John R. Nettleton served as the commanding officer of Naval Station Guantanamo Bay, one of the most secure and closely watched U.S. military installations in the world. But in 2020, his decorated Navy career ended in disgrace. A federal court found that Nettleton had lied to investigators, falsified reports, and obstructed justice during an inquiry into the mysterious death of a civilian employee on the base. What began as a confrontation between two men in 2015 turned into a years-long criminal case that revealed a secret affair, a violent argument, and an attempt to hide the truth. According to court documents, the story began on January 9, 2015, when Nettleton got into a physical altercation with Christopher M. Turr, a civilian employee whose wife was having an affair with the commander. Turr went missing shortly after the fight, and his body was found 2 days later, on January 11th, floating in Guantanamo Bay. Instead of reporting what happened, Nettleton lied to Navy investigators, denied any fight took place, and concealed his relationship with Turr's wife. The NCIS and Department of Justice later proved that his false statements delayed the death investigation and obstructed the search for answers. In January 2020, a federal jury convicted Nettleton on 6 counts, including obstruction of justice, concealment of material facts, falsification of records, and making false statements. On October 9, 2020, he was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison and 1 year of supervised release. Case 6. Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn was once a trusted member of the U.S. Navy's elite reconnaissance community. As a flight officer with access to classified information about military intelligence and operations, Lynn's career represented years of discipline and achievement. But in 2017, his name made headlines for the wrong reasons. After a lengthy investigation and court-martial, Lynn was convicted of mishandling national defense information, failing to report foreign contacts, and making false statements. A fall from grace that stunned his colleagues and drew national attention to Navy security protocols. Prosecutors revealed that between 2013 and 2015, Lynn failed to properly safeguard classified materials and communicated with foreign nationals, including individuals linked to Taiwan. He also transported classified documents in his checked luggage and withheld information about those contacts from superiors. Though Lynn was initially charged with espionage and attempted espionage, those charges were dropped under a plea agreement reached in May 2017. He instead admitted to mishandling sensitive defense data and breaching Navy reporting rules. The military described his actions not as deliberate spying, but as dangerous negligence that could have exposed U.S. intelligence operations. On June 2, 2017, a military judge sentenced Lieutenant Commander Lynn to 9 years of confinement, with 3 years suspended, leaving him to serve 6 years in prison. The court also ordered his dismissal from the Navy and forfeiture of pay and benefits. Case 7. Nicholas James Cassotis, once a U.S. Navy legal officer, lived what appeared to be a stable life in Georgia with his wife, Mindy Mabane Cassotis. But in December 2022, a horrifying discovery shattered that image. Hunters in Riceboro, Georgia, found dismembered human remains near a remote stretch of road. Within weeks, forensic testing confirmed the victim's identity. It was Mindy Cassotis. What began as a missing person case soon turned into one of the most disturbing murder investigations in Liberty County history. Investigators quickly turned their attention to Nicholas Cassotis. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation reported that he was arrested in May 2023 after evidence linked him to his wife's murder and dismemberment. Prosecutors revealed chilling details during the trial. Cassotis had carefully planned the killing, disposed of her body, and then tried to mislead authorities. The defense claimed he was innocent, suggesting that Mindy was killed by someone else. But jurors heard overwhelming forensic testimony and communications evidence that painted a clear picture of guilt. Then, in August 2025, a Georgia jury found Nicholas James Cassotis guilty on 12 counts, including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and concealment of a death. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 25 additional years for related offenses. Case 8. Jay Barcelone was a U.S. Navy veteran who lived in Lemon Grove, California, with his wife, Rona Fantone. Rona was a kind nurse from the Philippines who worked hard and was loved by many people around her. The couple lived in a small, quiet neighborhood where everyone thought they were happy. But on the night of April 16, 2021, something terrible happened inside their home. Neighbors heard loud shouting and called the police. When officers arrived, they found Rona had been stabbed. She was only 30 years old and did not survive her injuries. Jay was arrested that same night and taken to jail. The police said it started as a fight that turned violent. News of the tragedy spread quickly, shocking both the local community and people who knew Jay from his time in the Navy. He was charged with murder and was not allowed to leave jail while waiting for his court case. After more than a year, Jay decided to tell the truth. In November 2022, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, saying he was responsible for Rona's death. A month later, in December 2022, a judge sentenced him to 16 years to life in state prison. Case 9. Lieutenant Craig Robert Becker once served in the U.S. Navy, stationed in Belgium, respected, trusted, and married to a woman named Johanna Hove Becker. But on the night of October 8, 2015, everything changed. Johanna fell from the 7th floor of their apartment in Mons, Belgium. Becker told authorities it was a tragic accident. Yet years of investigation and mounting evidence told a different story, one that would end his naval career and his freedom. After years of inquiry, prosecutors accused Becker of premeditated murder, claiming he pushed his wife to her death after a history of violence and controlling behavior. Witnesses and medical experts testified that Johanna had previously shown signs of abuse and that Becker had once tried to drug her with a dangerous mix of pills. Becker maintained his innocence, but investigators insisted the evidence pointed toward deliberate murder, not an accident. On April 30, 2022, a U.S. military court-martial found Lieutenant Craig Becker guilty of premeditated murder, assault consummated by battery, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole and dismissed from the Navy. Case 10. Commander Michael Vanek Kem Misiewicz once stood as a shining example of courage and perseverance. Born in Cambodia, he escaped the Khmer Rouge as a child and rose through the ranks of the U.S. Navy, a journey that inspired many. But the man once celebrated as a hero became one of the most infamous figures in the Navy's Fat Leonard bribery scandal. Investigators later revealed that between 2011 and 2013, Misiewicz accepted luxury hotel stays, lavish dinners, travel, cash, and even the services of prostitutes from Malaysian contractor Leonard Glenn Francis, head of Glenn Defense Marine Asia, GDMA. In exchange, he provided sensitive and classified information about ship schedules, fleet movements, and port calls, all to help Francis win and manipulate Navy contracts. In January 2016, Misiewicz pleaded guilty to conspiracy and bribery, admitting that he had sold information critical to national security in return for personal luxury. Prosecutors said his actions were a staggering betrayal, one that endangered U.S. sailors and compromised military integrity. What made his case stand out was the deep contrast between his origins and his downfall. A refugee who became a Navy officer only to lose everything because of greed. His cooperation with GDMA gave the company insider access to U.S. operations across Asia, inflating service costs and costing taxpayers millions. By the 29th of April, 2016, Commander Michael Misiewicz was sentenced to 78 months in federal prison, ordered to pay a $100,000 fine and forfeit $95,000 in illegal gains. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Case 11. William Oliver Reese Jr. was a 21-year-old U.S. Navy airman serving aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, stationed in Yokosuka, Japan. On the night of January 3, 2006, Reese's actions would send shockwaves through both the American military community and the Japanese public. Near Yokosuka Chuo Station, he attacked 56-year-old Yoshi Sato, a local woman on her way home from work. When she resisted a robbery attempt, Reese dragged her into a stairwell and beat her repeatedly, leaving her with fatal internal injuries. She died soon after. The next day, Japanese police began a massive investigation, and within days, Reese was identified as the suspect. Under the U.S.-Japan Status of Forces Agreement, SOFA, the Navy handed Reese over to Japanese authorities, a rare move that underscored the seriousness of the crime. During questioning, Reese confessed, telling police he had been drinking and needed money. Investigators determined that the motive was robbery, but the violence went far beyond theft. The case inflamed local anger toward the U.S. military presence, and Japan's national media demanded justice. For many, it symbolized the strain between accountability and diplomacy in overseas military conduct. On June 2, 2006, the Yokohama District Court convicted Reese of murder during a robbery and sentenced him to life imprisonment with forced labor. Case 12. Chief Petty Officer Bryce Pedicini once served aboard the USS Higgins, a guided missile destroyer based in Yokosuka, Japan. As a fire controlman, he worked directly with advanced weapons and radar systems positions that required high-level security clearance. But between November 2022 and February 2023, Pedicini crossed a line few service members ever imagined. Investigators say he began sending classified military documents and photos of computer screens to someone he believed worked for a foreign government. That contact was part of a counterintelligence operation. What Pedicini thought was academic research became one of the Navy's most serious espionage cases in years. According to official court-martial records, Pedicini accepted payments in exchange for sensitive information about U.S. Navy operations and systems. Prosecutors revealed that he was struggling with personal debts and saw a way to make fast money. But the plan fell apart quickly. By early 2023, Navy investigators had traced his communications, seized his devices, and charged him with attempted espionage, failure to obey a lawful order, and attempted violation of a lawful general order. During his trial at Yokosuka Naval Base, the evidence included chat logs, bank transfers, and images of classified material shared through encrypted apps. On May 29, 2024, a military judge sentenced Pedicini to 18 years in prison, issued a dishonorable discharge, and reduced his rank to E1. Case 13. Rear Admiral Robert Gilbo once stood among the U.S. Navy's most respected officers. A career that spanned more than 30 years, marked by service in Iraq and multiple commendations, ended in disgrace when Gilbo became the first active-duty admiral in American history convicted of a federal crime. His downfall came not from bribery or theft, but from something that corrodes integrity at its core: lying to federal investigators. His case was part of the infamous Fat Leonard scandal, a massive Navy corruption investigation that exposed years of fraud and misconduct tied to defense contractor Leonard Glenn Francis and his company, Glenn Defense Marine Asia, GDMA. When federal agents questioned Gilbo about his dealings with GDMA, he denied ever accepting gifts or favors. But prosecutors revealed that he had enjoyed lavish dinners and hotel stays funded by the contractor and later falsified records to cover his tracks. In court, Gilbo admitted to destroying documents and lying to agents out of pride and fear of humiliation. According to the Justice Department, his deception obstructed an ongoing investigation into widespread bribery among Navy personnel, some of whom had traded classified information for luxury and entertainment. His confession marked a devastating end to a once-honored naval career built on loyalty and command. By the 17th of May, 2017, Guilbeault was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, ordered to pay a $100,000 fine and to forfeit $50,000 in gains tied to his misconduct. Case 14. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. once wore the uniform of the U.S. Navy, serving honorably during the Vietnam era as a damage controlman. After his service, he became a police officer in California, a man trusted to protect his community. But behind that badge was a darkness that would haunt the state for decades. Between 1974 and 1986, DeAngelo committed a horrifying string of crimes, burglaries, assaults, rapes, and murders that terrorized neighborhoods from Sacramento to Orange County. For years, no one knew his name, only the chilling titles the media gave him: the East Area Rapist, the Original Night Stalker, and eventually, the Golden State Killer. Investigators spent decades chasing a faceless predator who left behind shattered lives and cryptic clues. DeAngelo seemed untouchable, living a normal suburban life while his crimes faded into cold case files. But in 2018, DNA technology finally caught up with him. Using genetic genealogy, detectives matched his DNA from decades-old crime scenes to a relative's profile on a public database. On April 24, 2018, Joseph DeAngelo was arrested at his home in Citrus Heights, California, ending one of the longest manhunts in American criminal history. On June 29, 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and admitted to dozens of sexual assaults in a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Survivors and families confronted him during the emotional sentencing hearings that summer. On August 21, 2020, a judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Case 15. Navy Reserve Commander Jeremy Pittman spent more than 2 decades in uniform, serving with distinction in the U.S. Navy. But by October 2024, his career came crashing down in a federal courtroom. Prosecutors said Pittman abused his position to take part in a bribery scheme involving fraudulent recommendation letters for Afghan nationals seeking entry into the United States under the Special Immigrant Visa (SIV) program. What began as a gesture of trust and humanitarian support turned into a black market operation, one that undermined a system designed to protect allies who helped U.S. troops during the war in Afghanistan. According to court documents, between 2018 and 2020, Pittman accepted thousands of dollars in bribes to sign and submit more than 20 false recommendation letters. Each letter claimed he had personally supervised Afghan interpreters or contractors, people he had never met. Those letters were sent to the U.S. Department of State, falsely verifying the applicant's service to the Navy. Federal investigators later uncovered a paper trail of cash transfers and communications that exposed the scheme. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, and the U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Security Service led the investigation that brought Pittman to justice. On October 28, 2024, a federal judge sentenced Commander Pittman to 30 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to forfeit proceeds from the bribery payments. Case 16. Richard Allen served as a U.S. Navy Petty Officer First Class, trusted with access to valuable logistics and supply equipment. But between 2018 and 2021, that trust was quietly broken. Federal prosecutors say Allen helped lead a multi-state theft and money laundering scheme, stealing and selling U.S. military gear worth more than $850,000 to buyers around the world. His case would become one of the most alarming examples of insider theft the Navy had seen in years. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Allen and his accomplices smuggled restricted military items, including night vision optics, body armor, radio systems, and weapon components, from U.S. Navy and Marine Corps bases. They then sold this equipment online and to overseas buyers in Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, disguising the profits through cryptocurrency accounts and foreign wire transfers. Investigators traced the sales back to Allen's home in Virginia, where the operation was run like a black market business hidden beneath ordinary Navy supply work. In August 2024, Allen pleaded guilty to conspiracy and money laundering in the District of Rhode Island. The court sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and ordered him to repay the full $856,433 that he and his partners stole. Case 17. George Dodson II was just 26 years old, a U.S. Navy electronics technician living with his wife Shelby Dodson and their baby in New London, Connecticut. He had joined the Navy in 2017 and built what looked like a stable family life. But on the night of July 20th, 2022, everything changed. Police and firefighters were called to a burning home. Inside, they found Shelby, only 23 years old, severely injured and unresponsive, and their 13-month-old baby, still in a crib surrounded by smoke. The child survived. Shelby did not. What investigators uncovered next revealed one of the most disturbing domestic crimes in the state's recent history. Detectives learned that Dodson had grown obsessed with another woman and that his marriage was falling apart. That night, after an argument with Shelby, he bludgeoned her with a hammer, stabbed her multiple times, and then set the house on fire while their infant child was still inside. Dodson was found outside the burning home when emergency crews arrived. He later admitted what he had done, telling investigators he ruined everything. Prosecutors described the killing as an act of rage and selfishness that nearly cost 2 innocent lives. On February 19, 2025, Dodson pleaded guilty to murder, first-degree arson, and risk of injury to a minor. 2 months later, on April 30, 2025, a Connecticut judge sentenced him to 50 years in prison. Case 18. Lieutenant Randolph M. Prince was a U.S. Navy officer trusted with overseeing defense contracts worth millions of dollars. But between 2014 and 2015, that trust turned into a tool for deception. Stationed in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Prince used his position at a Naval Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit to funnel contracts for inert training aids to sham companies he secretly controlled. These fake suppliers billed the Navy for items that were never delivered, draining more than $2.7 million in taxpayer money. Investigators later found that Prince used much of the stolen money to fund a lifestyle far from regulation, one filled with high-stakes poker games, travel, and personal luxuries. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, he also lied on his 2014 tax return, hiding his illegal income. After a multi-agency investigation involving the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, DCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, and the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, Prince was arrested and charged with wire fraud and making false statements. Facing overwhelming evidence, he pleaded guilty on August 6, 2018, admitting he had defrauded his own service branch for personal gain. On January 7, 2019, a federal judge sentenced Randolph Prince to more than 4 years in prison and ordered him to pay full restitution. Case 19. Thomas Lewis Garner, once a young U.S. Navy airman apprentice stationed in Florida during the 1980s. After leaving the military, he built a quiet life for himself as a dental hygienist in Jacksonville. But in 2019, that calm life was shattered when deputies knocked on his door with a 35-year-old arrest warrant. What they uncovered connected him to one of the Navy's oldest unsolved murders. On August 5, 1984, Pamela Cahanes, a 25-year-old Navy recruit fresh out of boot camp, was found beaten and strangled in a field near Sanford, Florida. 2 days earlier, she had proudly graduated from the Orlando Naval Training Center and was preparing to start her naval career. For decades, investigators had almost no leads, but they preserved the DNA evidence. In March 2019, modern genetic genealogy technology matched that DNA to Thomas Garner, who was promptly arrested in Jacksonville. He had lived freely for decades, unaware that science would one day find him. In May 2021, a Seminole County jury found Garner guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors said he murdered Pamela only days after she earned her uniform, calling the act senseless and cruel. But Garner's legal troubles didn't end there. In 2021, he was also indicted in Hawaii for the 1982 killing of Kathy Warnett Hicks, another cold case reopened through DNA. After standing trial, a Honolulu jury acquitted him in July 2023, leaving only the Florida conviction to define his fate. Case 20. Matthew Scott Sullivan was a U.S. Navy sailor stationed in San Diego, California, living with his wife, Elizabeth Sullivan, and their 2 young daughters in the Liberty Station neighborhood. To friends, they looked like a normal military family, but behind closed doors, their marriage was falling apart, and by October 2014, their home had become the center of one of San Diego's most haunting murder cases. On October 13, 2014, Elizabeth was last seen near their home. For years, Matthew told friends and investigators that she had simply walked away from her family. But in October 2016, 2 years after her disappearance, a jogger spotted a body floating in San Diego Bay, less than half a mile from the Sullivan residence. The remains were confirmed to be Elizabeth's. Forensic investigators soon discovered her blood inside their bedroom and on a knife hidden in a closet. The evidence revealed a chilling truth. She had been stabbed multiple times, killed inside her home, and her body had been kept hidden before being dumped in the bay. Matthew Sullivan was arrested in Delaware in 2018 and extradited to California to face trial. In February 2021, a jury convicted him of second-degree murder. Prosecutors told the court that he killed Elizabeth during a domestic argument, stored her body in a freezer for nearly 2 years, and disposed of it to make it look like she had abandoned her family. On March 12, 2021, Judge Frederick Link sentenced Sullivan to 16 years to life in state prison, calling the murder cold and calculated. Case 21. Captain Jesus Vasquez Cantu, once a respected officer in the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet, was responsible for logistics and coordination across the Pacific. But in 2023, his career ended in disgrace. After years of quiet investigation, federal prosecutors revealed that Cantu had taken part in one of the Navy's most notorious corruption cases, the Fat Leonard scandal, a web of bribery, fraud, and betrayal that stretched across more than a decade. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Cantu began accepting bribes as early as 2007 from defense contractor Leonard Glenn Francis, known in military circles as Fat Leonard. In exchange for luxury hotel stays, extravagant dinners, travel, and the services of prostitutes, Cantu provided Francis with sensitive Navy information and helped steer ship servicing contracts to his company, Glenn Defense Marine Asia. These favors gave the contractor inside access to fleet movements and guaranteed lucrative maintenance deals across the Pacific. The scandal eventually implicated dozens of Navy officials, making it one of the largest corruption cases in U.S. military history. In February 2023, Captain Cantu appeared in a San Diego courtroom to face judgment. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison, fined $75,000, and ordered to pay $100,000 in restitution to the U.S. Navy. Case 22. Commander Gregory Edward McLean once wore the uniform of a trusted U.S. Navy officer. He served as executive officer of the USS Spruance DDG-111, stationed at Naval Station Mayport in Florida. For years, his peers saw him as a disciplined leader. But in May 2024, that image collapsed when he stood in federal court to face the consequences of 2 shocking crimes: the distribution of child sexual abuse material and the unlawful retention of national defense information. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, investigators discovered in early 2023 that McLean had been sharing illegal images and videos of minors through a social media platform. When federal agents and NCIS searched his home, they found not only thousands of explicit files, but also classified documents marked secret. These materials contained sensitive details about U.S. national defense operations, information he was never authorized to keep outside a secure facility. The revelation stunned both the Navy and the intelligence community. McLean pleaded guilty on December 7, 2023, admitting to both charges. On May 30, 2024, the court sentenced him to 13 years and 4 months in federal prison, followed by 15 years of supervised release. Case 23. Lieutenant Commander Ronald W. Zenga once represented the discipline and professionalism of the United States Navy. A skilled naval pilot, he served across the Pacific, including assignments in Guam between 2010 and 2013. But federal investigators later uncovered crimes that shocked both the military and the public. Behind the rank and uniform, Zenga had been coercing a minor and collecting illegal images offenses that violated federal law and the ethical code of every service member. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Zenga began manipulating and exploiting a minor while stationed overseas and continued his activities after returning to the United States. When investigators searched his home, they found hundreds of images and videos of child sexual exploitation stored on his electronic devices. He also used online platforms to share and receive illegal material, creating a digital trail that directly linked him to federal sex offense crimes. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, Zenga pleaded guilty on November 19, 2020, to coercion of a minor, distribution, receipt, and possession of child pornography. Then, by the 10th of September 2021, a U.S. District Court judge in Rhode Island sentenced Zenga to life in federal prison. Case 24. Ensign Dana Russell Collins was a young U.S. Navy officer stationed at Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland. In 1995, his name made headlines across the country, not for bravery or duty, but for murder. On the night of November 2, 1995, Petty Officer Jerry Lee Culbreth, 37, was found dead near the base. Investigators discovered that Collins had gotten into a violent confrontation with Culbreth, and evidence quickly pointed to him as the killer. The incident shocked both the Navy community and the quiet town of Lexington Park, where the two men had lived and worked. In July 1996, Collins pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, admitting that he shot and killed Culbreth. 2 months later, in September 1996, a Maryland judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the legal battle didn't end there. After several years in custody, Collins appealed his conviction, claiming his original defense lawyer had mishandled the case. In January 2002, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals agreed and vacated the conviction, granting him a new trial, a rare outcome in such a serious case. However, the new trial brought the same result. In 2003, another jury again found Collins guilty of first-degree murder. On February 12, 2004, he was once more sentenced to life without parole. Maryland's appellate court upheld the conviction in 2005, and a later opinion in 2020 confirmed the same outcome. Case 25. Nildelise Arlene Flores Roman was a U.S. Navy sailor stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. At just 27 years old, she had a promising future in uniform. But on the night of March 15, 2024, her life and the lives of those around her changed forever. What began as a night of celebration among sailors turned into a tragic scene that ended in bloodshed and heartbreak. According to Norfolk police and court records, the night started with a small birthday gathering. Flores Roman and her wife got into an argument after returning home to their apartment complex on East Little Creek Road. Witnesses said the fight spilled into the parking lot, and Petty Officer First Class Katrina Ann Anderson, a fellow sailor, stepped in to calm things down. But instead of ending the argument, the situation escalated. Flores Roman went inside her apartment, grabbed a handgun, and came back outside, firing several shots at Anderson as she tried to run away. Anderson was hit multiple times and died at the scene before help could arrive. The case moved quickly through the courts. On June 17, 2025, a Norfolk jury found Flores Roman guilty of second-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. On October 18, 2025, a judge sentenced her to 28 years in prison. If you found these stories interesting, please support my channel by hitting the subscribe button. I will be posting a lot more interesting videos daily, and I'd really appreciate your support. Thank you very much.